So we have about 10 minutes or so for questions. We have a roving mic. Thank you. So, who'd like to start off some questions? Jane. Oh, Jeb. Sorry. I'll come back to you. Nen.
Sorry, I'm the first one again. Yes, we, a team of two, Kelly and I, both from the road. We discussed about the first points of the 5 key things you mentioned, Tom. Reinvent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of not so sure at what point in our life, or career life, or personal life, we should think about this point. And does it mean that we're losing our identity, or exactly
Good.
why are you doing that?
Great,
Yeah.
good. Thank you, Nen. So the question was, at what point do we do it? How often do we reinvent ourselves? Do we reinvent ourselves for business or personal lives? And do we in fact lose ourselves in the process? So thank you for that question. My response to that is actually, I think as it's just part of our evolution as human beings, that we just get better with age. I look at it as, I think of wine, we get better, cheese, all, by the way, very countercultural to my upbringing, but I appreciate it. And I'm a great fan of whiskey, so old whiskeys. So, but I think look, as a professional, I think we need to constantly reinvent ourselves. So when I think about the early days, doing a lot of work in terms of cross-culture and cultural diversity, and then moving from there in terms of my own career to talking about cross-cultural leadership, and then to ethical leadership, moving on then to doing work with virtual teams, unconscious bias. Last year, I pivoted my practice. Last year, I had some health issues. I spent a lot of time traveling and flying in airplanes. And last year, I had some issues that stopped me from being able to fly. So I pivoted my work into executive coaching. And now my focus is really executive coaching. 4 years ago, if you had asked me, would I do webinars on Zoom and Adobe Connect, I would have said, no. Now I do Zoom webinars, I do Adobe Connect. That's all part of reinvention. So I think it's important for us as individuals to demonstrate that we are embracing change. Is that what we want our clients to do? We want our clients to embrace change. We have to also demonstrate that we also do things. I talk about the frustration I have with technology and how some people can just find it so easy to do things. Sometimes it's very, very frustrating. So I have empathy with that. It allows me to to appear stupid to my son, who's 15 and a half, who can teach me, Dad, it's so simple. All right, Jane.
Tom, thank you so much. And may I say how wonderful it is that here you are directly addressing us as practitioners instead of selling us your book. I don't believe and you've inspired me to buy it, so one of those is mine. Thank you so much. But the other thing is, in the age of now that the tide is starting to turn and diversity is so much part of our lives, now is the time when we are getting massive pushback from white superiority, from white supremacist, which is so deep in our consciousnesses. How are you maintaining faith in the face of the massive backlash around the world that we are seeing?
So the question was really, how do we maintain faith in the backlash that occurs? So I think before I answer that question, Roman wrote a great article last week actually on the backlash. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it because he really talks about specifically around gender issues. I think you will always get a backlash to any idea because what we're seeing more today is actually polarities. Okay, polarity. So it's that ability to deal with the other. Megumi, Mickey, and I here, we were in a workshop on process consulting just about a month ago, right? With Simon Schroedvoder, who came up from Portland, Oregon. And one of the exercises he did for us was to be in the other. And, I found it really difficult because I was sharing with the group that the week before I had attended a Anglican church synod, which is like a parliament. And one of the issues we were talking about was the ordination of women. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense. And I was completely flabbergasted by the number of women who stood up and spoke against the motion. I found that confronting. And I brought that up in the workshop. I said, I just couldn't get it. Like, I can't get, why are they saying that? I consider myself to be quite open, and in fact, when I shared that, in fact, with one of my trusted advisors, and he said to me, his feedback to me was, he said, Tom, and I said to him, I think they're so entrenched in their views, and he said to me, his feedback to me was, that's because you are entrenched in your views, Tom. I said, really? Oh, no, I'm not. That's not my self-belief about myself. I consider myself open, but it really had me thinking. And during the workshop, that was in fact one of the exercises I did. I looked at how do I get into the space of the other? It was challenging. I could get it intellectually, but I found it difficult kinesthetically, somatically, to be in there. And it's work, right? You still have to work. You still have to do it. I think it's important. I don't have to agree with the other, but I think it's important for us to get a sense of where is the other coming from. Like, it's, how do I meet that person, Because otherwise we don't listen. We're just on polarities. And again, that's a perspective. And it's not the truth, it's my perspective. It's perspective. Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Ken, I was just going to jump in.
Oh, Roman's got the mic. Whoever's got the microphone.
I haven't aged gracefully. Just wondering, when you met with new clients, because there has been an explosion in the work in D&I, with a lot of new practitioners on board and old ones. I love checking in on my own bias most of the time. But when you then presented, you go to a client and say, oh, here's a cold action plan, and this is the 10 points around employment and culture and leadership and accountability.
Yeah.
How do you steer them away from that conversation to look at contemplating a different way, which you've done in this talk, a different way of having a conversation and a different approach?
Great.
So not 100 pages, what's something you can do on a page that's really going to transform?
Terrific, great. So the question is, Ryan, how do you transform? And somebody brings you in, they give you the policy, how do we get them to look at it differently? So, that is not an area of strength for me. I do not do policy work. So the clients bring me in very specifically on certain number of things. I come in because I'm a provocateur. I come in to provoke thinking. So I work with executive teams, I work with senior leadership, and I come there to challenge their thinking. That's what I do. And I share experiences, right? I've worked with multinationals across the world. And I talk to them about things that's happening in different parts of the world. And I talk to them about how, as a leadership team, how are they dealing with some of the challenges. I always look at what's happening in their markets, who their competitors are, what are some of the things that they're doing. And that's what they bring me in for. So the policy, what do we need to do, that usually is then someone else will do that. That is not my area of strength. So I don't pretend to be all things to all people. That's not where I add value. Yeah. Thanks, Roman.
Thank you so much, Tom and Pitman. I talk to a lot of people, and I'm struck by very different views, certainly in terms of this polarised world where there's a new permissiveness to really say what you've really been thinking all along that you need to say. Now, we also have a culture, especially in diversity, where and the values of pluralism and your point before, here you are, these women standing up and arguing against their inclusion, and you've got to listen to all this and listen to different people's opinions. I what about the tensions with moral equivalence? When Donald Trump stands up and he says, look, there's good and bad on both sides around Charlottesville, when you had white supremacist murder, and he's saying, there's good and bad on both sides. And you've got to listen to that because this is what we are hearing. We have to open our minds. We've got these equivalents. You hear egregious stuff, and then you hear facts. And you've got to take the two as moral equivalents. That is a real tension. How do you manage that? It's not black and white.
Yes, no, it's not black and white. So I think one of the challenges that we have as practitioners, so I do this with a lot of my clients. I try to work with my clients to explain that the world is not black and white. You know, we have to learn to live in the gray. The world, there's a lot of gray. We have to learn to live with ambiguity, volatility, complexity, uncertainty, right? VUCA. You know, we have to learn to deal with that. I don't think there's any easy answer to that. And I think that's why the personal journey is important. I think all of us as individuals need to be able to embrace and see, where do I stand on this? How do I stand with it? What are my views on it? You know, and it's diversity, right? One person's answer is not going to fit another. Hence the importance of doing personal work. You know, the work that we do in diversity and inclusion, it's really around change. You know, we're wanting people to change. We're challenging people's viewpoints. We're looking at how do we get more inclusive, and how do we ourselves work with that. You know, if it was so easy, gosh, we'd be having an inclusive world, wouldn't we? It was so easy to do. I mean, it's like, and sometimes I think we just take all these things for granted. Earlier this week, I was working with a group of PhD students at RMIT. A wonderful group of students, very international cohort, and they were doing some design thinking workshops that had them coming together in groups that they had to work with external clients, and they only had one day to do it. And there were some cultural issues. And when we started talking about different cultural norms, values, behaviors, it was, and people in the group started sharing some of their stories, right? A young woman from Bangladesh said, this is what's important in my family, in my culture, this is how I view things. And someone said, in China, this kind of happens. And someone said, well, you know, here in Australia, why would that work? But it was the dialogue. It comes from the exchange. So how can we facilitate the exchange? Thank you.
Hi Tom, Alicia from the University of Melbourne.
Yep.
I'll hold it against you that you facilitated something.
I'm happy to come and do it at your place as well. No problems.
I wanted to pick up on your point about your story.
Yeah.
And as practitioners, we are at times called upon to share our story.
Yes.
On a human level, to really engage with our clients and our customers. How do you guard against, or what do you do to ensure well-being and self-care? Because putting your story out there over and over, it carries a big burden.
Yes.
And at what line, where do you draw the line to ensure that well-being is preserved?
Well, thank you. So the question was, you know, how do we guard our own well-being when we're telling stories? I think it's really important for us to actually, self-care is important. You need to work out how much do you share and what's the audience. So I know with you, all of you are D&I practitioners, right? So I feel like I'm in a tribe. I'm pretty open. You know, would I say the same thing if I was in a client? Probably not. I might scale it back a little. So it depends on the situation. And look, over years, what you do is, you build a collection of stories, right? So, you know, I've got a whole collection of different stories that I use. I mean, my latest book is all about stories. And what I find in the D&I world is we spend a lot of time thinking about dealing with the head, cognitive, cerebral, right? You need to go below the head. You need to engage people's hearts, their spirits, their soul, because that's where inclusion happens. All leaders you speak to will say, look, intellectually, I get inclusion is important. I get it. I get the fact that diversity is important, that if I get a diverse team, I can get greater results. The challenge is, how do I actually behave inclusively? How do I get out of my way? So how do we get below the line? So that's what I would say, like, how do we do that? And so you need to take care of yourself. You need to know who's the audience. Okay, what stories do I use for the audience? I use the example, whenever I'm presenting in Asia, places like that where credentials are really important, I tend to start with my credentials. I don't do that in Australia. If you do that, people look at you going, wanker, so you got to know your audience, who you're talking to. All right? Thank you. Folks, listen, I'm going to wrap up. So, again, I want you to know that what you do makes a difference. Okay? There was a lady called Dottie Walters. Dottie Walters started the Walters Speaking Bureau in 1943 when her husband went off to war and was killed, and she had to provide food, right? So for her children. So she started a speaking bureau and was in fact one of the first speaking bureaus in the world. I met her when she was 83 years old. And I said to her, Dottie, do you think it ever makes a difference, what we do? Do you think it makes a difference when we work with a group? And she said, Tom, in every group, there is always one person. There is always one person for whom the message is right. And you are the messenger. Okay, in every group. And that has sustained me for 30 years. Some people I've met who've kind of been those people, other people I haven't met at all. It's important for us then to kind of always just believe it makes a difference. Nelson Mandela is one of my heroes. And you may know there's a show called Madiba happening at the Comedy Theatre. It's outstanding performance, highly recommended. And obviously there's a Mandela exhibition at the museum. I was privileged to hear him speak when he came out here to Melbourne. And seeing the show just reminded me, in fact, of his inauguration speech. Because during his inauguration speech, he quoted a Marianne Williamson poem, which was really powerful for me. It helped me for many years. And the poem goes something like this, right? It says something like, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Right? Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that we fear most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, the question is, who are you not to be? You're a child of God. You're here to play. Playing small so that other people don't feel insecure does not serve you. You're born here to shine God's light. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we shine our light, we unconsciously give permission for others to shine their light. And when we let our fears go, we inevitably allow other people to drop their fears. Ladies and gentlemen, cultural intelligence, inclusion, agility, making it happen. You are the people who will make it happen. Who you are is more important than what you do. The most effective tool for change that you have is yourself. So I invite you, go make it happen. Thank you.